He's accepted none of the findings, he accepted none of the criticism of him. He's trying to blame everyone else for this. And really, that's the sort of behaviour that was kind of detailed in the report and what it was like working with him every day.
I'd say 2 of the complaints of bullying were upheld, with the report finding Raab's behaviour had been intimidating and aggressive. Dave Penman is General Secretary of the FDA Union, which represents civil servants. Dave, good morning.
Good morning.
What do you make of this then? He describes a very small activist minority of civil servants, specifically senior civil servants, I suppose. Those are the complaints that were upheld here. That's what he's putting this down to.
Yeah, well, it's obviously a desperate attempt from Dominic Raab to try and restore his reputation. Let's remember, this was an independent investigation, and there's only one arbiter on the outcome of this investigation, and that's the Prime Minister. Now, I don't know how Dominic Raab thinks somehow that's skewed, he's done nothing but complain about the investigation since it has concluded, though he was happy for a KC who was brought in, Adam Tolley, to investigate when it was announced. He just doesn't like the result, and now is desperately trying to rescue his reputation, including these spurious allegations about civil servants. And this is where we start to get into quite dangerous territory, and really the Prime Minister should be starting to intervene, because what Raab's now doing is he's saying, no, this wasn't just about me. This was a politically motivated group of civil servants trying to block government policy. Of course, he provides no evidence for that whatsoever in his desperate attempt to defend himself. But now, if he's going to keep up these allegations, the government really need to intervene to say that's not the case. The civil service is, as it always has been, impartial. And as Minister for the Civil Service, the Prime Minister really should be saying something.
Well, you say, understandably and rightly, that Rishi Sunak has been the arbiter in this case. Raab obviously resigned before he was, potentially sacked, as some have suggested was kind of on the way anyway. But Sunak also said it's clear there have been shortcomings in the historic process that have negatively affected everyone involved. Do you agree with the Prime Minister, the arbiter, on that one?
Absolutely. So, in which case, the Prime Minister should have done what we've asked him to do, which is conduct a review of the entire process. The process for putting a complaint in against the Minister is opaque. A civil servant essentially has to get the approval of the Prime Minister for it to be even investigated. The Prime Minister decides how it's investigated, and the Prime Minister is the final judge and jury on it. Now, if you're a civil servant concerned about the conduct of a minister, that's quite a daunting process to go through. You have no rights. So if you look at what happened yesterday, civil servants were sitting watching the news to find out what happened about their serious complaints about bullying, while Dominic Raab was given essentially a 2-hour window to defend himself before the Prime Minister published any evidence. This doesn't work for anyone. And what we need is a new, fully independent process that has the confidence of both ministers and civil servants. But up to now, the Prime Minister's refused to do that.
The report also described Mr Raab as an assiduous worker, typically putting in 14.5-hour days. Adam Tolley says there was no evidence that he shouted or swore at individuals or lost control in meetings. He never used physical gestures in a threatening way, was not vindictive, and intended no harm to those present. Do some civil servants simply need a thicker skin?
Well, I think you have to look at what bullying is. Bullying can be many things. If you humiliate someone, it did say he was aggressive, but you could humiliate and demean people without shouting at them. The idea that bullying is only people who shout or swear at people is, for the last century, to be honest, there are lots of ways you can abuse your power, which he's also accused of doing in the report, and have a real serious impact on individuals. This isn't about having thick skin. Adam Tolley was an independent KC and found that in 2 of the occasions he had bullied people. But this point of intent is actually a really interesting one, because we disagree with Tolley on this one. And so do the courts, because the last time we had to deal with this with Priti Patel, when she was actually found to have shouted and swore at civil servants and found to have bullied them, the Prime Minister let her off. And when we challenged that...
A different Prime Minister, it's worth noting.
It was a different Prime Minister, but the point is, when we went to the courts, one of the reasons that Boris Johnson gave for letting Priti Patel off was that she hadn't intended to bully people. Now, how you can do that with shouting and swearing them, I don't know. But the courts dealt with it. The courts said intent is not the issue. It is the impact on people's behaviour. So we've actually been to the High Court on this point, and it's ruled you can't just say, I can treat anyone the way I want, and then say, well, I didn't actually mean it, so it's not bullying. So I was a bit disappointed, to be honest, that that's in the Tory reports, given that we've already been through this once with the courts and ministers. But at the end of the day, Raab has been found guilty. And actually, if you look at the manner of his leaving and what he's done since, it kind of demonstrates the behaviour that is detailed in the report. He's accepted none of the findings, he accepted none of the criticism of him. He's tried to blame everyone else for this. And really, that's the sort of behaviour that was kind of detailed in the report and what it was like working with him every day.
Can I put to you as well, Dave, just on a kind of broader thought from all of this, and you've suggested that a lot of Raab's attacks on the civil service since his resignation are not justified. That kind of aside, the civil service is perceived as left-leaning by lots of people, whether it's Raab, whether it's several of our listeners, in fact, we'll read their text in a mo, who are getting in touch this morning. The perception is left-leaning, aiming to take down ministers that they don't agree with. Your members have got a real perception and a PR issue here, a tangible one. What are you going to do to address that?
But what evidence is there of this? I mean, it's astonishing. What happens is...
I'm not asking necessarily about the evidence. I'm asking about the perception, which, as we all know, is so crucial in politics. And the perception is that the civil service has gone askew. And what will you do to change that?
If you look at it, I started as a civil servant in 1985. If I was a civil servant now, I would have spent most of my career working for a Conservative government. We have had a Conservative government for the last 13 years. On what basis is it a left-leaning organisation? Where is the evidence that's actually done it? And of course, one of the problems is, which Dominic Raab knows as well, the civil service can't speak out. It is constitutionally unable to defend itself. That the Conservative government in 2014 actually amended the Civil Service Code to say that civil servants cannot speak to the press unless they have ministerial approval. So what you find there are ministers looking for excuses, trying to create a kind of culture war of a woke left civil service without any evidence, and then the civil service with both hands tied behind its back, unable to defend itself. Raab knew that yesterday when he wrote his 2,000-word opinion piece. That also means those civil servants who had been through the bullying with Dominic Raab have no opportunity to defend themselves publicly either. So they can't write a 2,000-word opinion piece to unpick the report and make further accusations against Raab. And we are now actually seeing civil servants named because of Raab's article, and other newspapers are starting to identify and target them. So yes, there may be a PR problem, but there's no way the civil service gets to defend itself. It's simply constitutionally unable to publicly refute these unfounded accusations.